everyone. We are a group representing a physics fair regarding to the topic of the power source of modern living. I am Heng Ponita from the class 10N and I am the leader of this group.
And I am Tuon Panharith.
I'm Theaniti from 10Q.
I'm Hazel from 10P.
I'm David Allen, also from 10N.
So about this topic, to start off, we would like to tell you about the recap of how electricity is conveyed. Before the widespread of renewable energy sources, we rely on the power plant of coal burning to generate electricity. And this process of generating electricity pollutes the environment through the carbon emission. Hence, people found alternatives to create electricity, and this is our objective and the hypothesis of our project as well. We want to show our project featuring Windmill and Hydroelectric dam that we want to prove the wind energy and the water current, which are renewable energy, is able to convey electricity and put into use, just like the burning of fossil fuels and coal as well. And the benefit or the upper hand of this is that it is safe, it is clean, and it is environmentally friendly. Now moving on to our very first part of the electrical supplier, the windmill.
I would like to first introduce the basics of windmill. Windmills are machines that harness the power of wind energy to create mechanical energy or electricity with the usage of kinetic energy. Windmills are 100 meters tall, making them as tall as the Statue of Liberty. And in the Netherlands, one windmill would be able to power 16,000 households in Europe. Windmills are installed in places with high altitudes, meaning strong wind, and in places without any blockage, meaning trees, that would block the wind currents and make the spinning of the windmills any slower or disrupting of the spinning. The last part I would like to talk about are the types of windmills. There are two types of windmills. They are traditional windmills, which use mechanical energy to do physical labor tasks, such as grinding wheat into flour or pumping water, etc. Meanwhile, on the other hand, the other type of windmill are modern windmills, which are the one we are showing in our model. We will show how it will create electricity for everyone to see.
So now that we know some basics of the windmill, let's move on to a little more of an in-depth explanation regarding to how the windmill works. So in the beginning, the head of the turbine has to spin or has to direct itself to the direction of the wind, meaning the direction of the wind and the blade's direction has to relate to each other or has to be in the same direction. And this is the process called yawing, and it takes a few minutes because the machine is large. And after this, the machine will start to operate itself or will start to turn on itself because windmill are large-scale user and they cannot generate with just the wind and the atmosphere alone. Therefore, it needs a kickstart or a little initial push. That is from the controller directly itself, where it generates or where it operates a little bit of power for it to spin itself, about 7 to 11 miles per hour in the beginning. After it exceeds 55 to 65 miles per hour, it will start to stop operating. Otherwise, it can damage the blade itself. Once it stops operating, the windmill will spin itself by the wind at the atmosphere. Now, while it spins, the windmill will generate electricity by two concepts applied. The first concept or theory is the law of conservation of energy. This theory states that the energy cannot be created or destroyed, meaning that energy exists everywhere and it always changes form. Now let's say that this windmill stops. The only energy that consists here is potential energy. Now when the windmill moves, kinetic energy is present, and this kinetic energy will be generated into electrical energy based on the second concept, which is a Faraday's law or electromagnetic field. This theory states that whenever a conductor moves inside a magnetic field, electric current is induced. So because of the turbine inside, a piece of wire or a large piece of copper wire is spinning inside a magnetic field, disturbing the magnetic flux, hence creating electricity. And that is how the windmill generates electricity and is put into use.
Now, for the last point I would like to talk about is that they are very flexible in terms of usage. They are able to be used in agriculture and other industries. As nice as they sound, there is always disadvantages. The first point of disadvantages I would like to talk about is that they are very hard to install because they are located in remote places, making installation costs high. Meanwhile, in places with not so ideal wind does not meet the conditions of windmills, it will be hard for those places to install them. And for the last point I would like to talk about is that they produce a lot of noise, contributing to noise pollution, which affects the locals living around the windmills and the local wildlife.
Moving on from the first section, we're now on to the second section of this electrical supplier, which is a hydroelectric dam. Well, before getting into an in-depth explanation of this, let's define the word hydroelectric dam. To do this, we would break down the words into three different words: hydro, electric, and dam. The word hydro refers to water, and the word electric refers to electricity or electric power, while dam refers to a structure that is built across streams or river, as you can see here, to keep control of the water flow as well as the water level. So to put this back together, the word hydroelectric dam means a structure that is built across rivers or stream to keep the water level in control while also creating electricity throughout the flowing current of the water.
So now that we know what a hydroelectric dam is, we should try to understand how it functions. So basically, water that is stored in the reservoir flowing through the intake structure, which then leads it into the turbine chamber, and inside the turbine chamber, the water is flowing in such a way that it's optimized for the turbine to harness the kinetic energy from the water. So after the water has entered the turbine chamber, it will come into contact with the turbine. And once it comes into contact with the turbine, it will cause the turbine to spin. And this spinning also causes the rotor, which is connected to the turbine, to spin along with it. The incoming water causes the turbine to turn, and along with it, the rotor, which is connected to the turbine. And this rotating rotor is placed inside a magnetic field, which is inside here. This rotating causes electricity to be produced. Once the electricity is produced, it can be stored or distributed for further uses. The dams work because they rely on the concept of hydrostatic pressure. The weight of the water on top pushes down against the water at the bottom, causing it to move at very fast speed and with a tremendous force pushing on the turbine and causing it to spin. That is why it is able to generate electricity. But none of this is worth anything without any actual uses. What are dams used for? Well, dams are used for a variety of things. They can be used to support ecosystem, biodiversity. They can also be used to supply water for agriculture, industrial, or daily usage in our homes. But most importantly for our topic, dams are used to generate electricity. Now, dams have their own advantages when it comes to generating electricity, but they also have their fair shares of disadvantages. Dams can also work in the opposite of restoring an ecosystem. They can be a barrier in the natural life cycle of wildlife. For example, fishes may have a hard time migrating back up to their breeding grounds. And another disadvantage to dams for us is that dams have a hard time adjusting to the demands during daytime compared to other sources of energy.
Now that we know windmills and hydroelectric dams do create electricity, this proves that our hypothesis is true. And now we should know, or we must know, how is the electricity distributed into household or is distributed into daily use. This distribution process involves two main things: transformer and high power grids. This is a transformer. A transformer is a device that converts low voltage current to high voltage current, or vice versa. Well, that means that transformer is divided into two types: step up and step down transformer. This is a resemblance of a transformer. And let's take an example of the windmill to the large power grid. This uses a step-up transformer. The primary coil has a less number of windings than the secondary coil. Because electric current flows up, the number of windings define how large the current should be. And the secondary coil should be larger because it's going to travel through a very long distance power grid that will then generate it to a closer power grid grid next to our households. And when it passes to the household or the smaller grid, this is where step-down transformer has come to use. Step-down transformer is the opposite, where the primary coil has a larger number of winding than the secondary coil. This is the way it is because the electricity that flows needs to be reduced to about 220 to 240 volts, which is the suitable voltage to use in daily households. This is then transferred into your household, firstly through the electric meter in your house, and then through the service panels, and lastly through the switches and the sockets in your house. And that is how electricity is generated and distributed to households and daily uses.
I will be again concluding everything by saying that for windmills, they use kinetic energy by spinning their blades through the power of wind. Meanwhile, hydroelectric dams use the water pressure to spin the turbine, which then generates electricity through, again, kinetic energy. After all that is shown and explained, I would like to say that these two sources of energy are very important and beneficial to us in terms of being able to provide us with an immense amount of energy and being clean and renewable. In the near future, I would hope that these two pieces of technology could be further improved to be more beneficial by further research and further experimenting through new technologies. Thank you.